Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Bridget. And thank you so much to all the speakers we've already heard this morning. The discussions have been so informative. As said, my name is Caitlin Zintz, and I am fortunate enough to be the director of WSP's archaeology teams throughout British Columbia and the Yukon. Our local teams work closely with Indigenous members and communities every day. We deeply value the insights they bring to our projects and the support they provide to our teams, both in the field and in the office. As a member of the FNPC and in other partnerships across the country, we have been working with and engaging Indigenous communities to find sustainable solutions for infrastructure projects. We have learned a great deal from these collaborations. We have seen firsthand how Indigenous involvement improves infrastructure projects for everyone involved. Indigenous ownership and equity partnerships bring together environmental stewardship, community needs, and economic prosperity. This includes revenue generation, skill development, and employment opportunities. At WSP, we have expanded our approach to Indigenous involvement in a way that supports not only employment and training, but also looks to work together to strengthen relationships with impacted nations. Including Indigenous voices in project planning and design helps build social trust and reduce uncertainty between stakeholders. With our national view, we're pleased to see these partnerships occurring across the country. Together, we can accelerate infrastructure development and support sustainable resource projects. I look forward to hearing our esteemed panelists on how they believe communities will achieve prosperity, self-determination, and economic development moving forward. And now, let's welcome our panelists to the stage. Ryan Daum, Manager of Economic Development, Tsawwassen First Nation. Erin Harlos, Director, External and First Nations Relations, Vancouver Fraser Port Authority. Dennis Thomas-Whonoak, Executive Director, Spitz Center for Indigenous Business Education, UBC Sauder School of Business and elected Councillor, Tsleil-Waututh Nation. And the moderator for this session will be Sharon, Singh, Co-Head, Environment and Indigenous, McMillan LLP.
It all depends. I might take too long. I speak a lot too, Darren.
It's a competition. All right.
Whoa.
So one thing I hate about these chairs is for short people, you can't actually reach the floor unless you're doing this. So, I know, 5'3". Thank you for all being here today. We have 3 more leaders on the stage who are shaping the economic development future, enabling self-determination of nations in British Columbia. You're all here today, I'm assuming, because you get really super excited about land governance, capital structures, self-determination, and because us geeks need support. When we talk about this, I was telling my sister yesterday, she's like, what are you doing tomorrow? I'm like, I'm doing a panel on economic development. She's like, seriously? Like, you get excited about that stuff? I'm like, not only me, there's like tens of thousands of people that get excited about this. And I kind of looked at her like she was a weird one. So you are my people, and thank you for being here today and hopefully leading into a great conversation. To set some context, this chair is really awkward, by the way, so I'm just gonna let it loose, and I'm sorry, this is just, it's gonna happen. It's my life, I'll get used to it. Indigenous-owned businesses contribute over $50 billion to Canada's economy. BC's Indigenous peoples alone contribute 18% to gross domestic income of this country. This is an opportunity not for Indigenous peoples alone, it's an opportunity for all of us. And you've all heard, the buzzwords around prosperity, self-determination, self-owned income generation. But this stuff takes a lot of courage. It takes not only fighting with, our governments, fighting with other industries sometimes. It takes also fighting internally with your own people, as you heard, in terms of trying to collate into a common direction and common form. But it's not just fighting, it's also partnerships. And I'm hoping today what we get into is those partnerships that you've been able to create and not only how difficult that's been, but also what the opportunity remains, what you still want to get done, how people in this room can also benefit, help you benefit in terms of the communities that you represent or the organizations that you represent. So with that, I'm gonna, Dennis, you said you like to talk a lot, so I'm gonna go to you first. You've been involved with some of the most significant Indigenous-led developments, not only in the Lower Mainland, but across Canada. MST is obviously Tsleil-Waututh, Musqueam, and Squamish controls around 160 acres of land, developable land worth over $5 billion, and you have a lot of folks from Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh in the room. And you've led a lot of on-reserve development for affordable housing, creating those community spaces that you heard other speakers talk about. And not only have you done the development part, you're also diversifying the economy for Tsleil-Waututh by looking at clean energy development and other sources. Projects of this scale are complex. They obviously involve industry, governments, and fast-moving markets. And there's a lot of pressure, at least in my world, to move quickly, to prioritize certain outcomes, and fit into externally defined frameworks, not only just break them, but fit into them, obviously, because that's how you get the deal done. I'm curious because Tsleil-Waututh hasn't just molded, it's created its own table and created its own frameworks. How have you defined prosperity, both collectively as a nation, but also yourself? And how have you protected that when you've been faced with these competing priorities that you can't always push against in terms of market forces, but be aligned to them whilst also being true to your priorities as well as how you define prosperity?
Great, that was a very long question. I'll try and see if I can answer that.
I'm the lawyer, so I like to talk a lot too.
But first and foremost, today TWN doesn't measure prosperity through ROIs or the bottom line. 30, 40 years ago, we got into the real estate industry for the very first time, and it wasn't to get tons of returns. It was really to get us out of managing poverty, trying to survive, also trying to get out of the red line. And today, with all of our own individual Tsleil-Waututh Nation, we're just going through another ATR, a 43-acre, roughly around 3 to 5 million square feet. We also have other projects within our own IR number 3. And then collectively with my relatives from Musqueam and Squamish, we have 170 acres. The current valuation is $5 billion, but once we get to rezoning, it's $50 billion. So that's the important thing that we all need to understand. There is that dramatic growth within collectively our projects, and that's where the opportunity is. And I really appreciate everyone talking about the opportunities here, but I think there's one thing we're missing. We're missing about education. We're missing about getting them at a young age to think about higher education. And I'll touch a little bit more on that in the future. But with our MST projects, and also our nation's projects and diversifying our revenue streams, it's about our identity and our culture. We see that as prosperity. Knowing who we are, where we come from, how we're trying to support other Indigenous entrepreneurs, that's prosperity. When we can say that we have 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80% built by Indigenous peoples or built with joint ventures, that's prosperity. And that's very exciting for us as leadership, as the nation, and also I know through the MST steering committee, because that's what we're doing it for the next 7 generation, and it's very exciting. The other thing is hopefully seeing, we are seeing it actually. We have Musqueam artists that has a partner with Arc'teryx. We're seeing a lot of our own members from the 3 nations that are thriving, becoming an Indigenous entrepreneur in this space. Right? That's one sector of an entrepreneurism. You have my cousin Kurt, elected councillor, Warrior Plumbing entrepreneur, staff of 35 people, 30 of them are Indigenous. We're starting to see this change. We need Indigenous structural engineers, we need Indigenous more architects, we need urban planners, designers, locksmiths, high-rise window washing companies. That's the rebuilding of economies. We have my relative Corey here with BCIT, trades, entrepreneurs, higher education. There's so much opportunity that will help everyone's conversation today. So we do need to go back to the bottom, to the roots, right? We always, talk about opportunities and jobs and careers. What are we as society doing to build that talent pool? What are we doing to help them go break barriers, financial barriers, location barriers to accomplish higher education? And so we're starting to see this change. And I know there's a couple of donors of mine. I'll switch my hats on to the executive director role for Sauder School of Business. Happens to be the #1 business school in Canada that I intend to do with my team to make the #1 Indigenous business school in Canada. And that's going to be right here in our backyard to help all of our projects. And one of those is managing donor relations and hiring and internship programs to come through all of these amazing products and opportunities and projects that we have. They're amazing. You're seeing the rebuilding of Indigenous economies. But it starts with education. It starts with high school. I have a Pathways program for grade 9 through 12 Indigenous high school kids. Last year was our pilot season. We did 70 students from 2 different school districts. Beautiful moments of impact, because statistically, we have the highest dropout in high school. Statistically, we have the lowest graduation rates. So that's what we need to fix. That's where we need to put focus on. And getting them at a younger age, grade 9, grade 10, get them back on that path. And then having stories of all of you and all the amazing things that we're doing and letting them know that there is a career for them after they graduate. And so this year we've doubled. I have about 100 to 140 Indigenous kids going to go through our Pathways program through Sauder. And again, just planting the seeds of all of the opportunities that we're doing. And that's very relevant to our leadership at my nation. I know it's very relevant to the other nations as well, as getting them to go to post-secondary, graduate, and then come back with leading either a business that's going to follow into that industry that they're part of, whatever sector it is. Ours is primarily real estate, but also just commercial retail unit. Out of all of our properties, the first floor and the second floor are all commercial retail units.
Right.
Right? So there's a few of them right there.
No, that's
Thank you.
awesome. And I want to touch on, you talked about what more needs to be done. I'll come back to you on that one in terms of communities. And I'm glad you gave out a shout out to Corey, because BCIT is really critical in terms of creating those pathways for education that are not traditional, like SFU and others, which are also important, as you noted. Ryan, thank you. I know you're contemplating. I've worked with Ryan before, and he's always very serious and very contemplative. So we're going to turn to you.
Okay.
Tsawwassen, Treaty Nation, a different context, but very similar in terms of it's a very clear vision, as when many of you have dealt with Tsawwassen as well, in terms of your pathway, what you prioritize, your long-term vision for economic development, and uniquely situated because of the industrial lands that you're adjacent to. And I look around the room, I see a lot of individuals from nations, I see a lot of individuals from development communities, as well as just generally those that you partner with. And I want to talk about something unsexy a little, which is the administration of the opportunity, and how you actually get to that position of within a nation where you put in the building blocks so that you can take advantage of that prosperity, prioritize appropriately for the community, so you're not chasing all the different opportunities or things that are opportunities which don't necessarily align with the strategic or regional priorities of the opportunities that you have in front of you. So I'm hoping you can touch on the unsexy parts, but also some information to those in the room that want to partner with you. How can they be successful when they approach Tsawwassen?
Right. So I'll share with you a bit of the process or the journey that I've been on. And a lot of it is, before this role, I was our finance manager, so I was in the office. I was very comfortable with a spreadsheet, and they pulled me out. So now I'm an economic development manager. And I think it comes from understanding and taking our time. I could have rushed to get a deal done. There was a lot of appetite to lease industrial lands, but I held tight. And it was first turning to the community and asking them, what are your values? Before we go to the market, we have to have a clear understanding of what we stand for. So we've done that piece of work, but at the same time, it was understanding the market and what are their values or what are their interests. And we're talking about priorities. So it was very clear to me that as opposed to the positions, I wanted to tease out what people's interests were. And where's the common ground? Because at certain times, we're going to have differences. Developing on our industrial land is a little bit different because it's part of our community. It's not somewhere else. It's right in our backyards. And that's one of the things I get away with is my house is adjacent to the industrial land. So when something goes there and someone says, not in my backyard, it literally is in my backyard. So again, being behind the spreadsheet, bit of an introvert, had to get really comfortable with having conversations, tough conversations, and continuing to have them. So we went down this journey, and it's taken some time. We started with a desktop scan. What's the opportunity? How is value being created on our lands? So we paused, and then we went to a data-driven analysis. So we took in all the inputs across the Lower Mainland. What are our lands best suited for? What wants to be here? So we did that piece of work. Then we went to the next piece of work. And I was afraid I was going to get in trouble for this one, but we did about 30 interviews with both existing tenants, institutional investors, folks who are successful developing on our lands, those who weren't, those who are neighbors adjacent to us, next to Roberts Bank. And we said, tell us about your experience. Tell us the good, tell us the bad. So we fold that into a plan. So we're really, really methodically taking our time. So when we go to the market, we're going to have a vision that puts forward Tsawwassen values, and it's deeply embedded a holistic branding of what we're going to put out there. And it's going to be really easy that we're going to create prosperity for ourselves, but also our partners, and we're going to try to reduce the risk. So when you come to us, we're going to have a clear vision on that. It may not be at all times with what the market or regional or national interests are, and they have a vision, but we want to be at the table so we can advance our interests at the same time. So when we get to market, it's going to be a vision, it's going to have a strategic framework, so it's just going to be very clear, and it's going to be very simple, but there was a lot of due diligence behind it, if that's helpful.
That is, I'm just clarifying, you have that strategic framework in place right now? Yes.
We do, and we're on the very last stages of it,
Yep.
which is working through an engagement process over about 3 months with the community. So by the time somebody gets to us, we've done a piece of hard work that industry can't do. They can't engage with the community the way that we can, and we've taken that piece out, and we're trying to aggregate that feedback.
And it'll be shared publicly so everybody will have access to it?
Absolutely.
Okay, perfect. Erin, over to you now. You're with the Vancouver Fraser Port Authority, obviously a big, massive role that you play in terms of economic activity in this region. I mean, on your website, I think it says 30 communities, but I'm pretty sure it's over 50 in terms of Indigenous communities that the port intersects with or impacts in some ways. And so with that kind of reach in terms of just the massive economic footprint that you have, along with your terminal operators who are also in the room, that reach, port is just not a stakeholder in this conversation. You're a regulator, you're a proponent, as we heard of RBT2. You're also a partner in terms of enabling some of the Indigenous-led prosperity and opportunities that we heard about today. So I want to ask, in terms of just your role as port, in your experience, what are the factors that build partnerships that truly share power and enable that power distribution to occur where there is unequal distribution? And what's the port doing through not just the impact benefit agreements, but other forms of partnership to support Indigenous leaderships and self-determination in this space?
Thank you, Sharon. And thank you, Ryan and Dennis. It's a pleasure to be here. I think the shift that you speak of, Sharon, is really rooted in the recognition of the value, the true value of First Nation partnerships, and a commitment by our organization as well as the port community to be respectful and trustworthy partners. As you said, the Vancouver Fraser Port Authority, we work to enable Canada's trade for the benefit of all Canadians. And to do this, it is critical that we work collaboratively with the port community and with First Nation partners. That is an essential part of the work we do. And we're committed to those relationships with First Nations, both as neighbors and as long-term partners in the stewardship of the land and waters that we all share. And as we seek to collaborate and partner, we're really seeking those opportunities for mutual benefits. And we're working to really embed that approach and the importance of these relationships in the work that we do, that the port community is doing, as we approach our work and the operations and project planning. A couple specific examples of these partnerships One is the relationship agreements. We are very pleased to have relationship agreements with Tsawwassen First Nation and with Musqueam, and we're seeking additional local First Nations. These agreements represent formalized partnerships, which are long-term and respectful partnerships, including shared stewardship commitments, as well as important economic opportunities. Additionally, we have with Tsleil-Waututh a collaboration agreement related to habitat banking projects in the Burrard Inlet. And we worked, a real success was the collaboration on the Maplewood Marine Restoration Project, which was really a partnership with the Port Authority and Tsleil-Waututh in the planning and the development implementation.
Can I just pause you there for a second?
Sure.
So just on that example, how has that supported the Indigenous-led prosperity? How have you listened to the community in saying this is the project that the port's going to support because that's going to generate that prosperity? I'm just going to link it back to the topic.
I'll answer that and I'll add Roberts Bank Terminal 2.
Okay.
I think, it's that co-development and it's the listening to understand interests, to be open to changing a plan based on, the knowledge and the input and the priorities of the First Nations, and to be working collaboratively. So that it's not that one is leading, it needs to be a partnership, and that leads to better projects. And that brings us to Roberts Bank Terminal 2, which is a generational prosperity building project. We have mutual benefit agreements, as you mentioned, with 27 First Nations on that project. And I cannot understate the value of the contributions from First Nations in the planning of that project. The close work with Tsawwassen, with Musqueam, with Tsleil-Waututh and First Nations in contributing to habitat planning and environmental that have truly made that a better project that we're really excited about moving forward, and that will have associated economic benefits, meaningful career opportunities as that moves ahead.
Okay, great. I was going to comment on the fact that I sit in this awkward position of representing a competing project, but we won't go there.
They're all needed.
No. We're going to do a rapid fire because I have some questions. I know there's some questions here, and I know we're not going to get through it because it's 35 minutes. So, first one is for you, Ryan. What's one challenge that you're navigating right now, whether it's regulatory, community-based, or political, and how are you approaching it? You got 1 minute.
I would say that it's the intersection of First Nation, from my experience, has a lot of interest and a breadth of responsibility, and I always think it's because they care. A lot more than a typical municipal, provincial government or regional or national. There's a lot of responsibility, and so my challenge is working in an ECDEV-led environment or function. How do I interact with those folks around me who are typically governmental in it? It's almost, sometimes I reflect on people, it feels like I'm a transplant from a different body into a government. I'm the ECDEV entity in the government, and like, what are you doing? How are you doing this? So how I plan on doing it is those conversations, taking time to work it through. Before we meet with an investor or a developer, let's get clarity internally about what we're presenting, and let's have those hard conversations, and I've learned not to shy away from them, and say, let's hash this out. And then let's document it, get it on paper. Everyone, a stakeholder, whether it's a design charrette, whatever it is, you have to work through that process. It takes time. And I always think of overnight successes. It looks good on the paper, but typically there's a lot of work behind the scenes, and that's what we're going through now.
As we heard Ali and Chief speak about earlier. All right, now over to you, Dennis. The biggest capacity gaps that you touched on in terms of skills, talent pool, enabling the next generation, that still hold nations back and from fully realizing their economic agendas. And you touched on some of the efforts that you're taking right now in terms of enabling the next generation to participate more widely in the economy. What other steps remain to be taken? You can take 1.5 minutes.
I think some of the opportunities that we have within our own community, again, is really tying it down to culture, being proud, being strong to be Tsleil-Waututh, being strong to be Coast Salish, and then honoring our ways of being and doing, our teachings. As we celebrate, stand strong with our survivors. couple of days ago, you know, we're still here. And these kids, especially we're very urban as well, sometimes it can be a little bit difficult. And so for us, one of the things that we're really strongly, you know, building upon is our protocols and our teachings to our kindergartens. Kids, preschool, our K-12 school, our own nation school, but then also the general local school districts. Because once they're able to be proud to be, you know who they are, where they come from in one foot, then now it's about getting that Western education, so you're walking in two worlds. And you're seeing with a two-eyed seeing approach, and that would be ultimately, hopefully, the end goal, you know, whether through its trades or higher education, you know, but they're always grounded to know who they are. And I think that's going to be an ongoing, you know, journey within all of our members. I'm still learning. I don't know it all. I watch all of my aunties and uncles that are here and elders. I sit and listen. And, you know, it's about bringing those teachings to our younger generations to learn how to sit and listen, because those are the beautiful stories that come out. And so it's about listening, absorbing, you know, and then when your time does come, how can you now pass the baton to that next generation? Those are key figures and initiatives or practices that we need to continue doing that I know that are very important.
Thanks. Erin, because that's a natural progression, I will give you 45 seconds. You can take a minute. I'm nice. I'm sure Bridget and David are going to invite us back next year because, you know, who wouldn't? And so you're back here in 1 year's time, you're on stage and you're talking about what success, what you've done in that year to advance the success, advance Indigenous-led prosperity. What do you hope to talk about? Sorry to put you on the spot.
1 year.
I'm
going to build on the listening and learning. There is so much experience being gained in this room, in this region, and so really trying to be building on that wealth of knowledge from First Nations and how they're working with contractors, what is working well with partners, and continue to build on that, and also hopefully moving forward on Roberts Bank Terminal 2 in partnership with First Nations.
Wow, that was 45 seconds. I'm going to go to those questions there first. I might leave out the last one unless you guys want to touch it.
I would agree.
Okay, good. We can talk about that afterwards. If you could redesign provincial or federal policy, one only, that could make a material impact in terms of unlocking some of the opportunities for you, what would that be? And I can go to Ryan first.
When I think about the opportunities, involvement in major projects, I guess what I'm thinking, a lot of my focus is on land development. So involvement in major projects would be fantastic so you can get a business up and running. But I was reflecting on it, I think even what Dennis said today, what's really important, and we had a youth forum on the weekend, I spoke directly to our kids. I said, you guys, you're my boss. And I said, you guys are going to be taking my role, you're going to be filling my role in the future. So I think if you don't have housing first for folks, and then education, it doesn't seem like much, but those are the people that I need to come up next in our community, members running the operations. And I know that's not quite what you're looking for, but I think long-term that's what's going to make it happen.
Okay, that's internal to go. Okay, Erin.
I'd just like to highlight the positive developments in terms of the equity opportunities that we're seeing in recent announcements, and just hope to see more in that space.
First question, right?
Sort of.
What was
No,
the question?
I made up my own question,
Okay.
but Erin, that didn't answer the question. My question was, what would you change from a federal or provincial policy? And don't worry, I'm going to go to Dennis because I'm repeating the question. That would help unlock some of the Indigenous opportunities that are currently being held up because of those federal and provincial policies. And if you don't like that question, we'll go to the question on the screen while you think about it.
Okay.
Fine. We'll go to the question on the screen. That was a great question. Good job for coming up with it, Sharon.
Yeah.
Where should the focus for industry be to best support the prosperity of Indigenous peoples and local nations?
I think, with all the people that come to these events, we can be the change makers. and really help elevate, economic reconciliation, good mutual beneficial relationships that take time, building trust, long-lasting relationship, long-term vision. It's not about the short transaction to immediately get on a project. So how can we as organizations, corporations, either develop their own reconciliation strategies, their own UNDRIP strategies, their own adoption of specific reports that really elevate Indigenous, prosperity. I've come across a lot of organizations that don't have any of that, but they want to help. So there's no strategy. There's no strategic level commitment to actually making change. So that's a challenge, that's an opportunity for organizations that are here to actually create those and live by them. The one thing that I'll always do is like, is that a strategic level commitment? And as soon as they say no, I'm like, well, that relationship right there is not building trust because they're not strategically going to follow it. It's one of the things that I think that will be very beneficial moving in the future is investing in the future. Invest in, higher education, invest in capacity building, custom programmings for those First Nations that are dealing with big multi-billion-dollar projects. Go there with some financial literacy programs, go there with board of governance, board of directors programs, really build capacity internally with those leaders and members, and you're going to eventually see that nation thrive, and they're going to be able to, they will be at that equity level, decision-making level. That's more for like that industry, but building, we have the highest growing Indigenous population. We are exceeding entrepreneurism by a record of 23% in the next decade, but yet we are still the lowest lowest entrepreneurs in BC. There's over 500,000 SMEs in BC and 3,000 SMEs that are Indigenous. That's less than 1%. We need to close the economic gap, and so that's where I want to try and bring that energy to.
Maybe, Erin, I'll just go to you in terms of just the plug for the VFPA, because I know there is that strategic level buy-in that permeates the organization when it comes to what Dennis has spoken about. Do you want to just highlight how you got to that point in the journey the VFPA was on in, say, a minute, because we only have 2 left?
At the Vancouver Fraser Port Authority, there is a strong commitment across the organization and with leadership on the importance of reconciliation, action planning, and the relationships with First Nations. As we understand, those are fundamental, they're foundational relationships to the work that we do and to the port community. And as part of our work, we need to continue to build those, continue to learn and listen, and to find those areas of mutual interest where we can pursue those joint initiatives that really align with those values and continue to build up the meaningful employment opportunities and contracting opportunities in support of projects and development that support our work through the port in a sustainable, long-term way. Thank you.
Ryan, I'm going to give you the last question, which I'm going to skip to the next question on the slide there. Any tips on how to support First Nation groups on building internal capacity to handle and support large development? Because I know you touched on Tsawassens, just some free tips for everybody else in the room.
I would say it is planning for procurement that's going to be lasting after the project's done. So there's an end goal in mind. I think also right-sizing the project's been very helpful for partners who are flexible to do that. When they've come to the table and they said they're bringing creative ideas to give members' businesses the opportunity to bid on work, that's super helpful. And I think just getting to know the community in that sense, that's part of it that I've found. Yeah.
And with respect to the second question, as you all know, Tsawwassen is appealing the decision, so I don't think it's fair to put anybody on the spot with regards to that. VFPA is a party or involved in it as well. So you can come up with the individuals afterwards or come up to the many lawyers in the room afterwards, but it's best to leave it there. I want to thank you all for sharing your thoughts and sharing what you're really passionate about, particularly the youth and enabling the entrepreneurs. I think that's something that is going to be a separate topic that Bridget will probably touch on in another forum. And I think you really have showcased how Indigenous-led prosperity is all of our prosperity together. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.